GoForThe2.com. We're into the Week 10 predictions of the college football season. A lackluster week in week number 9, 3-4 overall. We'll look to pick it up this coming weekend. Some interesting battles. I'm going to keep it to the ACC and Big 12 primarily. We'll look at the Big 12 to start off. West Virginia takes on Texas Tech. I liked Oklahoma State last week on the road in Lubbock. I think this is a worn-out football team in Texas Tech. They've played now 10 straight weeks without a bye. So I think that this is a really worn-out defensive football team that's given up 270 rushing yards per game. They're going on the road to Morgantown to face the Mountaineers. West Virginia likes to run the football. They're averaging 206 rushing yards per game, has two solid running backs in Wendell Smallwood and Russell Shell. I like the offensive line of West Virginia. They're playing at home. I think they're fresh, even though they're coming off a loss in Fort Worth to TCU 40-10. They did have a bye week prior to that. They have an extra 2 days to prepare for this matchup. They're fighting for a bowl. You look at Texas Tech wide receiver Jakeem Grant. He's coming off an ankle injury. He hurt it last week against Oklahoma State. And then from the emotional level, how up will Texas Tech be coming off a very emotional loss where they led for most of the ball game only to lose to Oklahoma State 70-53? I think West Virginia gets a convincing win. I think they win this game by 17 points. I do think it's high scoring. I think it's in the area of 50-33. West Virginia gets the victory over Texas Tech this coming weekend. Going to stay in the Big 12, big marquee battle. TCU travels to Stillwater to face the upstart, undefeated Oklahoma State Cowboys. I'm a believer in this Oklahoma State team. They solid defense. They have 30 sacks on the year. That's second in FBS. Agba, their standout defensive end, leads that team with 9 total sacks. But this is a team that's very solid in run support, only giving up about 138 rushing yards per game. They can create sacks and possibly keep Trev Boykin in the pocket. You look at Trev Boykin overall, this offensive line for TCU has only allowed 6 sacks on the year due to Trev Boykin's ability to break, contain, and improvise on the spot. But I think it's the TCU defense that has me worried about this matchup. TCU last year, a very solid defensive unit led by Gary Patterson. They allowed only 120 rushing yards per game. They were very opportunistic last year with plus 18 in turnover margin, and they were able to create a lot of interceptions. They had 26 interceptions last year. You look forward to this season, not the same defensive team. They're giving up 170 rushing yards per game. They're plus 4 in turnover margin, and have only now had 4 interceptions on the year. So they're not creating a lot of turnovers the way they were last season. They're going to be playing a very high octane offense in Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's averaging 351 passing yards per game. They're rushing for 151 yards per game, and they utilize a dual threat quarterback system with Mason Rudolph, the pocket passer, and J.W. Walsh, who is a mobile quarterback. So I like what Mike Gundy's doing. They're playing at home, and I think the defense for Oklahoma State is the difference. Keep in mind, too, look at TCU's last 4 opponents: Texas, Iowa State, Kansas State, and West Virginia. The only offense that really was very high octane was the West Virginia Mountaineers, and they're on a downturn coming out of a bye week. So that's the one thing when I look at this matchup. I think Oklahoma State's offense will allow them to be in this game from start to finish, and I think Oklahoma State strikes the upset in Stillwater. There's no way this game is not going to be high scoring. Let's call it 57-50. Oklahoma State gets the victory over Trevon Boykin and TCU. They hand the Horned Frogs their first loss of the season. Let's stay in the ACC. Marquee battle, Clemson and Florida State. Florida State's banged up. Everett Golson and Dalvin Cook did not play last week. It didn't matter. Sean McGuire and Jacques Patrick stepped up, played very, very well. They're now going to go on the road to Death Valley. Florida State's owned the series over the last 5 meetings, 4-1 overall against Clemson by an average margin of victory at 12.6 points per game. It's going to be a very difficult matchup to break down, but I think it's Florida State's ability to run the football. I know they're banged up, but I still think Everett Golson gets the start in this matchup because of a couple factors. If he's ready to go, he's got big game experience. If he struggles early, then Jimbo Fisher can go to Sean McGuire later in the matchup if the offense is sputtering. I think if you're Florida State, you want to keep this game very low scoring, or at least try to, and run the football. They're facing a very high octane offense in Clemson. Clemson coming off a dominating performance last week in Raleigh, 56-41. They put up over 600 yards of total offense. Their last 3 games against NC State, Miami, and BC, they've been over 500 yards of total offense in each of those ball games. Quarterback Deshaun Watson, very, very solid last week. 6 touchdowns, 5 through the air, 1 on the ground, and they're playing in Death Valley. I think Clemson gets this victory, but I think Florida State is able to keep this game very, very close. Florida State's defense, very opportunistic. They're +9 in turnover margin and very solid in run support, only giving up 138 rushing yards per game. So I think the game plan for Florida State is you're going to have to run the football, whether it's with Dalvin Cook or Jacques Patrick. Ball control, methodical drives to keep Deshaun Watson off the field. I think if Florida State can score first and try to get Clemson into an ugly type of ball game, they'll be in this game from start to finish. The one way you beat Florida State is over the top. The secondary's allowing 269 passing yards per game. Clemson not creating a lot of turnovers this year. So I think that's another area where Florida State has the advantage. Again, I think Clemson gets this victory, but I think it's very close. I think it's in the area of 7 points. I can see Clemson getting the 27-20 victory over Florida State. Florida State's ability to rush the football with Dalvin Cook and Jacques Patrick will allow them to keep it close, and I think they can force some turnovers against the Tigers and be in this game from start to finish. We'll keep it in the ACC, another interesting matchup. NC State travels to Boston College. I've been on this Boston College team all year. Last week, I jumped off and had Virginia Tech because of the Boston College offense sputtering right now, only averaging 108 passing yards per game, struggling offensively, and now the defense seems to be giving way because offensively they're not giving their defense any help, can't move the football, getting 3 and outs. Defense wears down. They're going to be playing a team in NC State that has struggled on the road in Chestnut Hill. Boston College has won the last 2 games in this series by convincing margins, 12.5 points per game. So Boston College has the advantage in the series against NC State. But I look at this NC State team. You look at Jacoby Brissett. He was able to move the football last week. He has offensive weapons. He might be without running back Matt Days in this matchup, but still, I think it's the speed on the perimeter that is the difference. You look at Boston College overall, their starting running back, Tyler Rouse, did get hurt last week, so they are limited at the running back position. Whether he is 100% or not is the main question. Quarterback John Fudal did come in, played very well in the fourth quarter. He was 8 of 20, 143 yards, 1 interception. He's a walk-on freshman that just played very well last week when thrown in to the mix because Troy Flutie did not play after 1 pass in the ball game. So not sure about this Boston College offense. Whether Fudal goes or not, they're still limited in terms of passing offense. And I think NC State does have enough weapons to really put the pressure on Boston College in this matchup. I think it could be close early, but in the end, NC State has way too many playmakers on the offense, and I do think they get a 13-point victory over Boston College. I think they can score some points, both teams in this matchup. Not sold on NC State's defense, but they do have the better offense, and I think NC State does get the 33-20 victory over Boston College this weekend. We'll stay in the ACC conference, Louisville and Syracuse. Louisville coming off a lackluster 20-19 victory on the road in Wake Forest last Friday night. They now come back home to face Syracuse. Syracuse playing much better over the last few weeks. They played a solid slate of teams, played LSU tough defensively. Defensively, they played Florida State tough for the early part of that first half in Tallahassee. So they have some playmakers. Dungy, their quarterback, can make plays, keep them in this ball game. They have a big play wide receiver, Steve Ishmael, and the defense played very disciplined last week. So you look at this Louisville team. Lamar Jackson does come back. He's probable. Reggie Boniface coming off a concussion. Quarterback situation in flux for Louisville. But I don't think they're that good of a team. I know their defensive line is playing very well. But I think Syracuse can fight for a bowl. They'll be in this ball game from start to finish. I think they can run the football against Louisville's defensive front. I think Louisville gets the victory, but I think it's very close. I think it's up there in terms of points. I think it's a 33-30 victory by the Cardinal. Syracuse is able to be in this game from start to finish, and I do think that Syracuse will be in this game and possibly pull off the upset in Louisville, Kentucky this Saturday. Another interesting ACC battle. Notre Dame and Pittsburgh. Notre Dame struggled last week against Temple. I said Temple will get the upset 27-20. Well, they came close. They lost that matchup 24-20. They now, Notre Dame, have to make back-to-back road trips to the state of Pennsylvania, be facing a Pittsburgh team that is coming off a loss on Thursday night to North Carolina. Marquise Williams, 26-19, didn't play very well. They do have an extra couple of days to prepare. And you look at this matchup, overall, traditionally, these have been very close games. But I like Notre Dame's offense in this matchup. I think Notre Dame has the offensive weapons to stretch the Pitt secondary vertically. Kaiser should be able to break out. Fuller had a big day last week. I think he's able to exploit the secondary of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh very one-dimensional in terms of offense. Nate Peterman playing very well, but their lone offensive weapon is Tyler Boyd, who leads that team in receptions and yards. It's a significant drop-off from Tyler Boyd to the rest of the wide receiver core. Haven't been able to really spread the ball around, and they methodically work down the field, much like Temple, but they don't have the same dominant defense that the Temple Owls have. So I think if they're going to try and get Notre Dame into that type of game, I think Notre Dame will be able to muscle them on the offensive defensive lines. I think the speed of Notre Dame is the difference. I think they're able to exploit the secondary of Pittsburgh, and I do think that Notre Dame gets a convincing victory in Heinz Field this coming weekend. I think they really put it to Pittsburgh and Pat Narduzzi. I think he'll have a solid game plan in place. They'll be able to play 1 or 2 quarters with Notre Dame, but in the end, the speed of Notre Dame is the difference. I look for Kaiser to break out both running and passing in this matchup, and I think Notre Dame does get a 20-point victory. I think it's 40-20 over Pittsburgh this coming weekend. Another interesting matchup that we're going to look at, Northwestern and Penn State. Penn State now hitting on all cylinders, a solid dominating performance at home. They shut out Illinois 39-0. Christian Hackenberg and the offense seem to be gelling and be very cohesive as they move on to Ryan Field to face Northwestern. This is a Northwestern team, though, that dominated this matchup last year 29-6. They're coming off a bye week and a very solid defensively. They did have a very solid defensive performance and offensive performance 2 weeks ago on the road in Lincoln against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Were able to get that road upset victory against the Cornhuskers. This was an emotional team that head into the bye week with a lot of momentum. I think the week off will benefit this team in Northwestern. You look at Penn State, 6 of their 7 wins have come at home. So the only victory that they've gotten on the road is against Maryland. They won that ball game 31-30. Maryland not that solid. That's after Randy Edsall did get fired. They're playing much better ball. But Penn State did struggle in that matchup 31-30. And I think that Northwestern does have the advantage on the offensive defensive lines. I think they're able to pound the football against a solid Penn State defensive front, and I do like the secondary matching up against Christian Hackenberg. I also like the defensive front matching up against a suspect Penn State offensive line. Entering that matchup last week against Illinois, Penn State allowed 28 sacks through 8 games. That was ranked 126 out of 127 teams in FBS. So Illinois was able to get to the quarterback last week as well. I think Northwestern at home will have success. The extra week off will benefit Pat Fitzgerald. And I do think that Northwestern rolls in this matchup. I think they get this victory by 17 points. Do think it's high scoring, 41-24 over Penn State. Northwestern rolls. Should be a very interesting matchups across the board. We have a big one in the SEC, Alabama and LSU. You can listen to my radio show this coming Saturday, 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. Any game I didn't touch on now, I'll touch on my show on Yahoo Sports Radio Network, 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. Eastern Time at streamysr.com. That's streamysr.com. Stay with me all season long. College football is the best.